Good morning, church. How we doing? Everybody doing okay? Come on, you're awake. You're awake. I mean, we just got the blood flowing through worship. If not by just being alive, you got to be happy to be alive. Okay. Hey, can I split the room real quick? Is that all right? Okay. I just want to do it. I'm gonna go ahead and divide the room, and I'm gonna just say it, and we're gonna get it out of the way, and then everybody will be okay afterwards. I'm just gonna say it. Dads are the best. Dads are the best. We're the best, we're the best, we're the best, we're the best, okay? And all you moms that are giving me judgmental eyes right now, let me explain why, okay? And all the kids section is going to agree with this. And this is why dads are the best. Because dads are willing to help the children do everything that the moms say that they're not allowed to do, okay? And so we are the ones that when mom's not looking or mom's gone or anything like that, it's like, yeah, we could jump off the roof. I think we could do that. We could do that. We'll go up. We'll jump off the roof. We just won't talk about it. We won't tell mom. If you get hurt, you've tripped over the corner of something. That's who we are. And so we become the best because we're willing to do the things the moms aren't willing to do. And that's just who we are. And we're going to live it and we're going to own it. And so we put on a great performance for y'all on Mother's Day. But secretly, we know this is the most popular holiday that exists is Dad's Day. No, I'm just kidding. Moms are the greatest. But we're going to try, all right? We're going to try every once in a while to steal some light. Hey, we are in our fourth week of our Paradox series, and hopefully you've been enjoying it. The one thing that we really don't want to ever happen in this place is for us to spend 5 weeks on a subject through a series, and you go like, I have no idea what they were talking about. We want you to gather it. We want you to gain from it, and we want you to grow. If we're not growing, then we're shrinking, right? And so we want to make sure that we're continuing to grow. And what we're basically doing is we're looking at some statements in the Bible that are just kind of odd statements because they contradict everything that we see, hear, and live out in the world. Because, who goes like, oh, if you want to live, you got to die. And, it's just like, who says stuff like that? Jesus says stuff like that. That's who does it. And it's so different for us to hear these things. And so we come to church every week and we try to learn, and then we read our Bibles and we try to gather knowledge, but then we go out into the world, and sometimes what we see and what we live and what we're interacting with doesn't exactly stand up to what we learned. And so we get put into these positions where it's like, okay, what do I do? If I am learning this is how I should be, and this is what I see, how do I mix the two worlds? How do I mix my faith that I believe in and that I want to stand on and the world that I'm living in? Because nobody wants to be like judged or harassed or to be looked different. But what we do want to be, what we are trying to do is we are trying to be the followers of Jesus Christ that don't just go with the flow, but that we bring light into the dark world. And that's really the goal, is how do I blend these two where I take what I've learned and I see what my faith is and what's happening, and I take that into the world in a way where people see it and go, that's different. I see how everybody else is, but for some reason you're different. And you're handling things different, and you experience things different, and you don't do the things that other people do, and it brings a little bit of light. And so when we go like, hey, you need to share your faith with, your workplace and with your family and all that, you're not going to go up to the person in the cubicle next to you every day and go, let me tell you the gospel. Because they're like, I heard the gospel, I got the gospel, you don't have to tell it to me every day. But what you're going to do, how you're going to share your gospel is through non-compromise. By holding a standard of living that's different than the rest of the world. And when they see the benefits of it, because you're going to produce some really good fruit, they're going to go, you know what? There's something to what you're doing. And so our life is the living gospel. And that's really what we're after. We're after a view or of understanding of how to live that actually shines light into a world of darkness, in a world that is struggling and hurting and suffering because they don't understand what's happening, or they don't have the faith and the hope that we have. If you didn't have Jesus Christ in your life, do you know how hard it would be to live in this world? How hard it would be to watch the news and to see all the prices go flowing. I mean, if you didn't have hope and faith in Jesus Christ that He's got it under control, do you know how much stress and anxiety that would bring into your life? But we can look at that stuff and go, you know what? Yeah, the world does look crazy. Yeah, it does look like it's all falling apart, but it may be falling apart, but it's still in my God's hands. And he still has control, and he's still using it, and he's changing things, and he's using things. And we're going to look back on this time that was stressful for us and go, man, God was so good during that time. He did so many great things during that time. And so that's really what we're talking about in this Paradox series is that, it may look one way, it may sound one way, it may be contradictory, but God's way is always the right way. And you don't have to worry about that. When you live God's way, you don't have to worry or fear about judgment or about people coming down on you or any of that, because when you are in the will of God, guess what? He closes the mouths of lions, right? He takes care of all your needs. He's in the fire with you, protecting you where you come out and nothing's touched. You don't even smell like smoke. You know what I mean? That's the kind of God we serve, that if you are in his will and you are obedient, he takes care of it for you. And so that's where we want to be. I hope that's the life that you want, is that, man, I have security and hope and faith in my Jesus, and my Jesus is taking care of me. And so we're going to dive into one that is really weird, and I struggled all week kind of putting this together, because I'm like, man, this is kind of a hard thing to kind of put out there, because it's freedom through servitude. And freedom through servitude sounds so weird. And the reason that it's a paradox is because the worldview of this is that if you're a servant, you're not free. And, and I just want to say that we would view that as you being bound to what you serve. And in itself, we look at that and we go, that's not exactly wrong. And so how can Jesus come in, and how could the Bible teach that there's freedom in servitude? Because it just makes no sense to us. See, the major problem with the mindset that you can be free and you can be free of servitude is that the Bible understands that you always are going to serve someone. Everyone serves someone or something. And you may be looking at me right now like, I don't serve nobody. Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. Because if you're not serving anybody, there's chances are you serve yourself. And what does that mean? That means I put myself over everyone. Like, hey, if I want it, I go get it. If I want to do this, then everybody better get out of my way, and I'm going to make sure this happens. And you have a mindset that you're the most important thing, and so everything has to evolve around you, and you're serving yourself. In fact, if you look at the Bible, it will even do some weird things and say some weird statements that if you want to be great in the kingdom, which who wouldn't want that, right? I mean, I want to be great in the kingdom. I want to be known. I want the big mansion in heaven, right, with the golden streets out. I want that kind of stuff. If you want to be great in the kingdom, you have to be called to be a servant. And it's like, why do I have to serve to be great? Well, Mark 9, verse 35 says it this way. And what's happening at this moment is Jesus has been talking a lot about the future and the kingdom coming. And he's been saying a lot of things like, hey, I'm gonna die and I'm gonna go away and I'm gonna be back in glory. And he's talking about, the future kingdom and who he's gonna be in it. And these disciples go, well, I'm your disciple. I want to be great in the kingdom too. And so, hey, can I be at your right hand or maybe at your left hand? And who's gonna be the greatest? And they're trying to discuss a lot of this. And so here we go. And Jesus sits down in this verse and he says, it calls the 12 disciples over to him and he says, whoever wants to be first must take last place. And I've played a lot of sports in my life. I never ran track, but I'm pretty sure last place doesn't get the first place medal. You know what I mean? I'm not sure. I'm not an official or anything, but it doesn't make sense in the world that we live in. First is first. Second is the first loser, right? You know what I mean? That's just how we are. And so he's saying, look, if you want to be first, you got to be last. And what? Be the servant of everyone else. Wait, so if I want to be great, I got to serve everyone else? How does that make me great? See, the world projects a thought that we can actually enter and achieve a state where we're our own, right? And nobody tells me what to do, and I don't have to serve nobody, and I'm free and I'm complete, and there's nothing that has me. And I just want to help you agree that we're always serving someone or something. And I just wanted to tell you that it might be yourself, but then some of us serve our job. Because, look, it's Father's Day. Let's just be honest, men. A lot of men tie their identity to their job. And it becomes who they are. And so we take on this responsibility where if I'm going to take care of the family, then I got to make sure the job is right. And so I put so much power into the job that while I'm trying to take care of the family, I may actually be neglecting the family. Because I'm trying to take care of the job to make sure the job's right, so that the money flows down and so I can take care of the family. And it's like we're trying to do the right thing, but by doing the right thing, sometimes we're serving the wrong thing. Or maybe your family is who you serve, and that's not a horrible thing as long as it's in the right order. I mean, we should serve our family, so there's good things you can serve, but your family can't be before God. But then right after God comes our family. Or maybe it's money. Is money the most important thing to you? You do anything for $1? If that's true, I got some bird poop on the front porch. I want you to clean up for $1. You know what I mean? It's like some of us will serve the money. Maybe it's the world. Maybe it's sin. It could be God, which is a good thing, right? But then Paul teaches us that you can actually serve righteousness. And so this is kind of what we want to get into is this mindset of servitude. And in Romans, it says that this is 6:17 through 18. Thank God, once you were slaves of sin, but now you are wholeheartedly obeying this teaching we have given you. Now you are free from your slavery to sin, and you have become slaves to righteousness. What's really interesting about that is he doesn't say you're free from sin and you serve nothing. He goes, no, you're free from sin, and now you're a slave to righteousness. And we go, wait a minute, I don't want to be a slave to nothing. But that's just not how it works, right? You're going to serve something. The point Paul is trying to make in Romans is he's trying to explain the fact that the problem is not servitude. That's not the problem. Because guess what? We are going to serve something. The issue and what we have to be aware of is who and what we are serving. So it's not that we are serving, it's who and what we're serving. When we serve the wrong thing, we find ourselves under a heavy weight. It's basically what happens. We find ourselves being bound and chained and under a weight that we carry, and we are just, let's just be honest, we're not strong enough for it. And I'm going to go through some scriptures, and a lot of these scriptures are going to make this sound like this is for like unbelievers becoming Christians. But let me tell you, there's Christians here this morning that are under a weight. That when you wake up in the morning, you feel the burden and the heaviness of life and the anxiety and the fear and the heartache and everything that you're doing. And as you serve things, you feel the stress and you shouldn't feel everything you're feeling, but you can't help but doing it. It's not because you want to, but because life is hard. But when we serve the right thing, which is of course God, then there is a freedom in that servitude that frees us from the weights of this life. But to get the true understanding of what Paul's trying to talk about in this concept, we have to go a little deeper. I don't know if you figured this out or if you know this, but sometimes maybe you're a good Bible reader and you read the Bible a lot. But if you just read it at surface and you kind of go through it, a lot of things can be misleading because our translation is not always great. So every once in a while you got to read something and you go, well, that sounds kind of weird. If it sounds kind of weird, stop and look up those words. Because a lot of these words mean a little bit different in the Greek than they do in our English language, and we lose some of that there. And so we have to find the true meaning of what Paul's talking about when he says that we are a slave to sin or we're a slave to righteousness. And so when Paul talks about being slaves to sin, if you look at the Greek of that and what he's trying to say, it actually translates into someone who cannot help themselves from making unrighteous choices. So it's not that they want to, it's just they can't help themselves from making unrighteous choices. And instantly you're going like, well, who's that? It's you. It's me, right? It's us. We are the ones that are sometimes a slave to our sin, and we can't help but make the unrighteous choices. It's not a matter of wanting to or not wanting to, but there is something inside of us that it just happens without us knowing, and we fall into the things of this world. And we start serving things that bring weight and stress and anxiety and hardship and heartache and all sorts of things, loss into our life. And we're carrying these burdens, not because we want to carry burdens, but because we are a slave to our sins. You can relate to this, and I can relate to this. And Paul can actually relate to this. Look, Romans 7:15. This is Paul. The Apostle Paul tells you this. I don't really understand myself. Have you ever been there? Like, I don't know why I'm doing this. I don't even get why. I don't want to do this. Why am I doing this? I don't understand myself. For what I want to do, or if I want to do what's right, but I don't do it. Instead, I do what I hate. I do the things that I don't want to. It's not that I want to do. I just find myself doing these things. And look, it's not that you want to be a sinner or I want to be a sinner. I believe that we're all good people here. Let me tell you what you didn't do. You didn't get up this morning, set an alarm on the weekend when you have a million things to do. You didn't set an alarm on the weekend, get up, get yourself all prettied up, right? Come all the way up here to church to sit here to listen to me so you can be a bad person. That's not what you didn't do that. You are here because you have a desire to grow and to be better and to learn about God and get closer to God. You want to be a better person. But it's because of our nature that we have become slaves to our sin, which on our own, we're unable to do this. Let me just be honest with you, right? Can we be honest with each other just for a moment? There has been times in my life where I have something in my life that I know doesn't belong. You know there's stuff in your life, it doesn't belong. I need to get this out of my life. And so what do? I go, you know what? I've tried and I've tried and I've tried. So let me go ahead and give this God guy a chance, right? And so we finally turn to God and we go, I need your help to get me past this. And so God, as faithful as He is, He comes into our life and He helps us and things get better and we stop doing it, right? And as soon as we stop doing it and things get better, we go, woohoo, I'm over it. And we stop relying on God to help us to overcome. And so we stop relying on God, and guess what just pops back up in our life again? The same thing we just got rid of. And we look at ourselves and I go, why am I doing this again? Because you stopped relying on God. Everything got good and the problem was gone and everything's fixed. And so what do I need God for? Why do I need God in this situation? Because you couldn't handle it then. Why all of a sudden do you think you got it now? On our own, in our nature, in who we are not strong enough to overcome some of this stuff. There's some things I have in my life that's no problem for me. On my own, I'll be like, no, I'm just not going to do that, right? But then there's some things that it's too much for me. And it's different from you, and it's different for you, and it's different for you. You don't know what is the thing that will bind you. But whatever it is, it's bigger than you. And you will need God to come do it, but you can't just go like, oh, I got it now and let God go. And so we're unable to overcome it. So what does it look like? Well, if you are addicted to something, and let's just be clear. I know we say the word addicted and we go, oh, that's drugs. Well, it can be. It could be alcohol. It could be TV. It could be sports. It could be social media. It could be whatever has got a hold of you that you can't, if you spend all day thinking about getting home to do this thing, you are addicted. You know what I mean? It can be an addiction of any sort of thing. If you are addicted, guess what? On your own, addiction wins out. It wouldn't be an addiction if you could stop it. The reason it has the word addiction is because it's beyond your ability to stop. And so you're enslaved to it. And on your own, it wins out. But maybe you're enslaved to your job. What does that look like? What does that mean? And my wife is back there. She will tell. I've gone through this before, where you're sitting at home and you're eating dinner, and the phone rings, and it's like, oh, I got to get up and I got to go get that phone, because whatever it is more important than eating dinner with my family in that moment. I'm just being honest. I've been there, right? What if somebody needs me right now? And it's more important than what's happening right there in that moment. And it's like, hey, yeah, we're important too. And it took my wife, talking to me and going like, you can let it sit for 30 more minutes and then call them back while we're eating. You know what I mean? Does your whole family go out to eat and go out and you are always at home working because you got to have the job done? And the family's just going like, you know what? I would rather you have less money and be with us than have all the money and never with us. You know, that, sometimes we think we're doing the right thing because we're trying to provide, but yet it's like our family's suffering because all they want is you, and you're trying to take care of the family and everything. Don't get me wrong. Don't go quit your job. You need your job, right? Don't do that. But it's the priority of things. Is the job more important than the family? Do your kids just wish that mom or dad would be at home? Or does it always win out? Or maybe you're enslaved to your personality, and I'm not going to. I picked on somebody first service, so I'm not picking on anybody second service. But there's people out there that everything has got to be in its place, right? And so if I go to your house and I move something, you're going to be like, "Who touched it?" And you ain't going to be able to sleep at night until you go down and put it back in its place. You know what I mean? Your personality takes over and it controls how you do it. And look, you're a perfectionist. Anybody a perfectionist, right? Don't raise your hand. Don't raise your hand. You're going to be guilty. But look, if you're a perfectionist, sometimes you have the ability to put your standards above the way you treat people. I'm not saying that you do that, but it may happen. Maybe you're a leader at work and you treat people really horrible because you expect them to be a perfectionist like you, and they're not a perfectionist. It's not that they're not getting work done, it's just not your way. And so you have this standard, and that standard you put above people and the way that we love people. And so you can be enslaved to all sorts of things. And we have to understand the effect this has on our lives. Because you can't just live life in the world and expect it doesn't do anything to you. See, sin brings things into our lives that are beyond what we can handle. The Bible often refers to us as sheep, right? And we'll get into that a little bit in our next series. But do you know sheep aren't animals that carry stuff? You don't see sheep with saddle on them or, like a big thing on them. The sheep are not animals that are meant to create and hold burdens. You are not created to carry burdens. No, we are to rely on God. And so we look at this and we see that sometimes we bring things in our life that isn't healthy for us. But let's look at the other side. What is Paul talking about when he says you're a slave to righteousness? This begins and ultimately starts with, like everything else in our religion, it starts with the acceptance of Jesus Christ. When we accept Jesus Christ, we're just in a better place to handle anything. Why? Because there's power in that. With this acceptance of Christ, we then are free from the bonds of sin. What does that mean? People say bonds of sin. What are you telling me? It's not that sin disappears out of your life. What it means is you're not stuck. What it means is you have now got a choice. You got a power inside of you that if you tap into it, you don't have to sin anymore. See, before you couldn't help it, but now you have Jesus Christ, who is the power that overcame everything, sin, temptation in the world. He's living and moving inside of you. And so now you can go, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. I'm not bound to sin anymore. And now I have a choice to do something else. And I no longer have to suffer under the weight of sin. What is the weight of sin? It's guilt, it's shame, it's anxiety, it's fear. It's these things that we feel in our life that weigh us down. Why? Because we know better. When you have that conscience going inside of your brain saying, don't do this, you know it's going to displease God, you know you shouldn't be doing it, and you go, I can't help myself. No, you can. You may not want to in the moment, but you can. Why? Because Jesus Christ lives and moves inside of you. Once we get this freedom and we get a taste of it, let me tell you, you're never going to want to let it go. Why? Because you're not truly living life unless you're living life serving Jesus Christ and the freedom that He offers. Life can get you down. Some of us, man, we wake up in the morning and I'm like, I'm exhausted. I haven't even done nothing yet. You know what I mean? That's how you know life has got you down. Like you wake up tired. And life is winning, but you don't have to live that way. You don't have to be that way. You can have joy when you wake up in the morning. Why? Because you have breath and life, and you know that God is going to be able to do new things through you. And so what's been holding you down, guess what? You have a choice. The greatest thing about God is He gave you a choice. You can choose to be a slave to your sin and a slave to this world and a slave to all the things that weigh you down, or you can choose to be a slave to righteousness, which offers freedom and peace and joy and comfort. It's in this type of living, when we're a slave to righteousness, the Holy Spirit lives and moves inside of you, and it convicts us and reminds us about our choices. It reminds us of where we came from. You want to, change your mind quick? Remember where you were before God, and remember where you're like, I don't want to go back there. I'm telling you with 100% assurity, because there was a time in my life where I'm like, I don't need God, and it was horrible. Don't do it. Like, I'm telling you right now, life is so much better with God than without God. If you've lived life without God, you know what I'm talking about. Misery, suffering, all that thing, and I'm like, no, I need God in my life. And so it reminds us of the choices and help us to remember that you don't have to sin. You don't have to be bound. You don't have to keep going through these things. A lot of us sit in our positions because we throw up our hands and go, what can I do about it? What you can do about it is get God involved in it. That's what you can do about it. Remember, we're no longer stuck by the bonds and the chains of sin in our life. Why? Because Jesus Christ broke all of that on that cross. It's where we become slaves of righteousness, that we get to live and breathe the freedom that God offers. However, we need to define righteousness a little bit more. See, it's defined as living a life of conformity to the standard of the law of God. This means that you live honestly and legality. And so like the way I live my life, if I am a slave to righteousness, I have no choice but to live in the way that God has designed me to live. I have no choice. Just like you didn't have a choice but to live to your nature of sin, you have no choice but to live in the way of God. And that's where we want to find ourselves. Being a slave to righteousness means you have no choice but to conform to God's will. As a matter of fact, we owe that to God for everything He's done for us. Now we have to be careful, because now we're like, oh, you know what? I like that, Pastor. Pastor, you're doing good, right? I'm doing good. I agree. You know what I mean? And so we're in this place, and you go, I learned everything you taught me. If I don't sin, then I become righteous. And that's a very dangerous place to be, because we need to dive a little bit further in that, because you and me and we are sinners. And the only way we stop sinning is through Jesus Christ doing something inside of us, right? And on our own, doing the things that we can't do. And so we don't really, I'm just saying, we don't really make ourselves righteous. You don't make yourself righteous, and I don't make myself righteous. But what we do is we put our faith in Jesus Christ, not only to change the inside of us, but to make us righteous with God, right? And so we don't put on our own righteousness, but we put on the righteousness of Jesus Christ. And you be like, what are you talking about? Well, let me just share what Ephesians says. Ephesians 6:14 says, stand your ground, put on the belt of truth and the body armor of what? Of God's righteousness. It doesn't tell you to put on your own righteousness. It tells you to put on God's righteousness. Why? Because He is the only one that made it through this life without sinning. He's the only one that was found right with God. He's the perfect sacrifice. We are just hoping that we can figure it out, right? And the only way I've figured it out is by putting my faith in Jesus Christ. Paul is telling you, take this nature that you have, that you are born with, and remove it, right? The nature of sin, which leads to sin and death. Put that down, but then pick up and put on the nature of Jesus Christ. Change who you are through Christ, because His nature and who He is a nature of righteousness, because He was the one that overcame the world. Let me just share Philippians with you. This is Philippians 3:9. Paul tells us what? And become one with Him. Become one with Jesus Christ. Why? Because I no longer count on my own righteousness through obeying the law. Let me tell you what they had to do. They had to be right by following this perfectly. One person did it. And so the struggle was, the only way God can see me as righteous, the only way I could be right with God was if I did this perfect. But the only problem is I can't do it. And so he's like, I'm done trying to create my own righteousness. And so I no longer count on my own righteousness, but I become righteous through faith in who? In Christ. For God's way of making us right with Himself depends on what? Our faith. Not on the faith of what we can do, but on the faith in the work of Jesus Christ and what He did on that cross. And so I don't try to boast in myself that I can be sinless and put on my righteousness, but through the power of Jesus Christ and what He's done and what I believe in him and the finished work of the cross, I can use him to work inside of me to help me overcome my sin, overcome my shame, and overcome these things. And I can put on his righteousness, and God can look down on me and go, you are doing good. And he blesses us, and he looks down and he shines upon us, and it's exactly where we want to be. And so I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. And so I want to give you a picture of what this looks like. If you don't know by now, I have a niece that is not my blood, but is through friendship. And so this is my bestie, Jacqueline. All right. And Jacqueline has brought her life with her. Okay. And we're going to try to do better this time, Jacqueline. Yep. Arms up. Okay. This is Jacqueline, and she is working through life. She's a young teenager. There's lots coming at her. I mean, goodness, I would not want to be a teenager today. You know what I mean? And you see, here's the thing about life. Jacqueline has a choice every day. And the choice that Jacqueline has every day, ooh, you locked your elbows. You're serious. Okay. Look, she has a choice. She woke up this morning. She has a choice. I can serve anything that I want in this world. I can serve myself, I can serve my addictions, I can serve anything, or I can serve Jesus Christ. And let me just tell you, you have to make that decision every day. Every day is a choice. Who am I going to serve today? But as we all know, in these choices, there's going to be results, right? For every action, there's a reaction. Oh, I got science on you. You know what I mean? There's things that happen. In Bible terms, we see this as every choice you make produces what? Fruit. And you're going to produce fruit, and you're going to have results in your life that show and reflect the choices that you make. And so let's just look at Matthew and see what Jesus says here. And this is 17 through 20. It says, a good tree produces what? Good fruit. A bad tree produces bad fruit. A good tree can't produce bad fruit, and a bad tree can't produce good fruit. So it's not mixed up. So every tree that does not produce good fruit is chopped down and thrown into the fire. You don't want to be thrown in the fire, right? So she's trying to do good things. And you can see that a tree, a person, can be identified by what it produces. And that's just basically common life. You will look at the way someone lives their life by the fruit of their life. And as we discussed, that there are bad decisions that we can make in life. And these bad decisions are when we serve sin, when we are a slave to sin, a slave to the world, and we bring things into our life that weigh us down. And so we can see here, let me help you. I don't want you to get too tired, okay? That she can make the choice to give in to her addictions. And, maybe they're not horrible things, right? TV's not a horrible thing. Music's not a horrible thing. There's a lot of things that we get addicted to that aren't horrible things. It's how we use them, how we interact with them in our life. But our decisions to put these things first bring weight into our life. Because there's something inside of us that desires the next fix. I can't concentrate at work. I can't concentrate with my family. I'm never really there when I'm there because all I can think about is the addiction. And so what happens is we bring into our life different emotions and feelings and situations. And so when we have addiction, especially if they're like a bad one, right, we bring in things like, I know I shouldn't be doing this. And so we enter in, you ready? Don't make me spill. Hold steady. Guilt. And I know I shouldn't be doing this, so I have to hide it because I'm ashamed. And now, because I'm hiding it, I'm a liar and everything else. Oh, is that too heavy? I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. Here, have a little more. Okay. Sorry, not sorry. And so here we are, and now... So she's struggling, right? She's got this thing that she now has to carry around, and so we carry this guilt and the shame and these burdens in our life. But maybe it's not just an addiction, but maybe like we talked about. Let me help you. See how good I am? Okay. Your job and success. Like success means so much. All I want in my life is to be successful, which is not a bad thing, right? God wants you to be successful.